Hi there. In previous lectures, we've been talking about promotion, and we mentioned the various branches of promotion. Uh, One most prominent is advertising, but also we have public relations and personal sales and uh, various other branches. And they all need to work together. They all need to echo the same message. And that includes public relations, which we're going to talk about today. Uh, Public relations is about building good relationships with various publics, building goodwill, building an image, not as directly as perhaps advertising will, but it's still very important. And one of the things that a lot of marketing managers wrestle with is the value of public relations, uh, because it is less direct. It feels like you're spending money and doing less, but actually what we're trying to do is influence third parties, and that can be very powerful. I may have previously mentioned that in many organizations, public relations organizationally is in a different place. Often it doesn't report to marketing because in many cases there's corporate public relations where they're dealing with the overall image of the corporation as opposed to dealing with the products, dealing with the image of the CEO. And so sometimes there is a little bit of a disconnect. And I know of some public relations professionals who don't really think they're part of marketing. Um, that their ultimate aim is to help sell products. Uh, Not all. I mean, I've met a lot of great public relations people too, but understand that sometimes in real life there is a little bit of a disconnect in some cases. And has to do with, serving different masters and different objectives. But in general, public relations is a good tool to have, in your toolkit. Um, we create, well, through public relations, we can create and build a desirable image for the company and its products, and through third parties. Um, if you think about it, if you watch a TV spot and you see somebody holding up a product of some sort and telling you how wonderful it is, I'm presenting it probably more elegantly than I've suggested, but uh, and then you see somebody maybe on the street who's also talking about it, who's going to have more credibility? It is going to be the person on the street, mainly because they have no vested interest in promoting the product. And what we want to do is to get third parties to promote the product. Among those is the press and any other influencers that might help us. There are some advantages of public relations. It tends to have a lower cost because you're not making these huge media buys that we talked about with advertising. But it doesn't have zero cost. Most of the cost is labor. People who write press releases, spokespeople, people to help with interviews. Um, not that there aren't other expenses there, but labor is probably one of your biggest issues, in terms of cost. Another advantage is it has greater credibility, which I've kind of just referred to about this, third parties, uh, you know, influencing third parties to get them to promote our products indirectly. The disadvantage, of course, is that you have less control. What you're trying to do is generate word of mouth, and by definition, those other mouths are not under our direct control. And this is another reason that perhaps certain marketing managers are a little reluctant to rely on public relations. But it is an important thing to invest in uh, ahead of time, proactively. Unfortunately, some companies or managers wait until there's a crisis and they say, oh, well, we need some public relations. We need crisis management people. And the trouble is that the reaction to that by various publics is, oh, they're reacting to a crisis, as opposed to some other companies which proactively manage their public relations, their image, their relationships with various communities, various publics. And that's what you want to do, is you want to try to proactively manage that. There are various functions within the public relations realm. One is press relations, having good relationships with the press. And you might maybe to these days also managing relationships with various influencers. And that's, of course, this is one of the primary areas that public relations people will focus on. Now, by press relations, it doesn't mean necessarily schmoozing editors and producers, but certainly, developing a professional relationship with them is very helpful. Obviously, product publicity, since we are marketers, we want to promote our products and have the press and others refer to them frequently in a positive manner. Also, there's an area of community relations or public affairs, and this is where we are dealing more directly with the public, usually on a community level basis. For instance, actually, a great example of this would be with Timberland boot. The people who make those yellow boots, and their logo is sort of a circle with a tree inside. Timberland makes obviously more than boots; it makes a lot of apparel. And if you are a Timberland employee, you get the usual, vacation time, sick leave, personal time, that sort of thing. But you also can get 7 days where you can go out and go serve the community. In fact, the company will also often organize this, and it might be volunteering to clean up a park or repair a playground or paint classrooms or any other public community activity that helps the local community. I worked at a previous college, Gibbs College, where they had what they called Gibbs Gives Back Day. And both students and faculty went to a local park and just cleaned it up, cleaned up trash, cleaned up any, maybe there's some branches laying around that might be dangerous. And it was just, it was promoted as, this local college trying to, be a part of the community and help them. And, and of course, that might, suggest that maybe when you're considering what college, you might have considered that, that college as an option. Certainly, it would ingratiated itself with the community. And that can be very helpful if there's a problem later on. And then you're, again, proactively trying to help the community. And if something bad happens, they say, well, okay, maybe, they're just a bad thing that happened to a good company. I actually heard that term used actually in relative to another company. I'll talk about that later. We have government lobbying, and this is a more specialized area. Generally has, with many people, a negative connotation. However, lobbying is a civil right. You as individual citizens have the right to lobby Congress or the state assembly or the state senate or your local town council. And some companies will hire agencies to help with that. I worked in one case with a lobbying group. It was on behalf of the Spinal Muscular Atrophy Foundation. Spinal muscular atrophy, or SMA, is a horrible degenerative disease that afflicts children, many of whom don't live past the age of 5. And the foundation felt that getting close to a cure, or at least a significant move forward towards a cure, and they wanted funding for the NIH specifically to work on this. And so I worked on some advertorials that would, and we'll talk more about advertorials, that essentially helped. And I'm pleased to say we were successful in getting Congress to allocate another $5 million for NIH funding specifically earmarked for SMA research. And that was actually a very pleasant activity. Now, of course, where government lobbying gets its negative connotations is when it involves campaign donations, and we want to obviously that's an issue actually beyond the realm of this course, but obviously it's something that as citizens we should pay attention to. But I don't really want to get too political here. Investor relations is another area, and this is a more specialized area. For publicly traded companies, there is a relationship between the company and its investors or potential investors, and there are a lot of rules. Things like to avoid insider trading. You may be familiar with the concept of insider trading, where someone who has inside material information trades shares of the stock. Either they think it's going to fall or they think it's going to rise based on information they have. And investor relations organizations or departments try to get material information out to the public as quickly as possible and in a way, and as evenly as possible. This is why they will often make the announcement on a website and where everyone potentially can see it at the same time, or have what's called a conference call where, and they usually do it maybe, let's say after the trading has closed, and anyone can dial in and listen to whatever the announcement is of the material information. So nobody gets it before anyone else. And that's kind of a very specialized area. Most PR people are not dealing with that. They usually there's special departments that deal with investor relationships. And they observe rules set out by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Donor development is another one that is, well, it's very important for not-for-profit organizations. Not-for-profit organizations, while they may sell a product or service to support their altruistic aims, in many cases they are looking for donors, people to donate money, who will not necessarily receive anything or very much in return. And as having worked with a number of nonprofits, I've seen these organizations work very hard to develop their donors. And obviously they will try to develop those relationships. One particular type of event I've noticed they use is something you may have heard of called Casino Night, where they actually have like a casino, even though gambling is illegal. When you're doing it for a charity and there's no actual money you're not winning money, maybe you're winning prizes, then that sort of gets around it. And similar to bingo nights and other types of raffles and things like that. And it's a way, and I work with one not-for-profit organization, and when I first heard about it, I said, "Oh, well, do you make much money?" He said, "Oh, we make almost no money on it." And I thought, wow, that's kind of odd. He said, no, it's a donor development, a donor relationship function that we're having. We get them to donate big checks at other times. So it's a way of having a social event, which brings people in and generates good feelings towards the organization. There are a great number of tools available in the public relations area. The most common tool, probably the most important tool, is the press release, where essentially you write an announcement, a story, and you send it out to the media, the news media, to publish. And I'm going to talk more about press releases in a little bit. We'll get it. It is probably the most important public relations tool. And one thing you should probably do is learn how to write a press release. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. We also have press kits, and press kits will include a press release, but also include maybe photographs or illustrations, maybe even brochures if it's a publicly traded company, annual reports. If your product is something small, you might even include a sample of your product in there. I will tell you that press releases are much more likely to be published uh, if there is some sort of visual, a photograph or an illustration in particular. Um, it grabs more attention in a newspaper or a magazine or wherever you're hoping to get it published. Maybe it's online, uh, wherever, because people are attracted to visuals. And so, um, after you've sent out a press release, you might be asked to do a media interview. Many many media outlets will not just publish your press release; they want to build their own story. So the press release might trigger a media interview, um, and it might be simply talking to somebody over the phone, and then they'll write their story, or it might be a media, like a broadcast media or a radio interview, uh, and it's important, or a television interview. It's important to understand that in general, reporters are not looking to get people. They're just looking for a good story. They're looking for good quotes. I have to admit, the first time I did a media interview, I did not do a great job. It was actually with a reporter. She was from the Newark Star Ledger, and she, spoke to me, and I had to send her actually a photograph that she needed for the story. And after the initial phone call, I realized I had not done a great job. So what I did was I wrote her a letter that went along with the photograph I was sending, and in there I gave her some more interesting quotes. And when the final article came out in the paper, there was more from the letter that I had sent than from my actual interview. And so I've learned, I want to give them good quotes when I'm interviewed. I don't always have the opportunity to send them a letter or an email. There are various types of broadcast. For interviews, there's live, taped, and live to tape. Live is, as you say it, it goes out. It's broadcast. People can hear your words exactly at the time, or maybe there's a few second delay, but essentially there's no editing. Taped is just it's recorded, and it can be edited, and that's kind of an issue there. And then there's live to tape, and occasionally there are shows where whatever you say goes out. They don't really edit, and you want to be careful about this. And let me sort of relay a story where this was very important. Actually, let me just first talk a little bit about, particularly if it's video, if you're in studio, talk about multi-camera recording. So here we have our interviewer and our interviewee, and it was studio with 3 cameras. Many of them, what may even have more cameras, but 3 cameras are kind of standard. One camera is kind of the overall shot. It gives you the overall 2 shot, it's called, showing both people. Then you have another camera that shows the interviewer. Maybe you might see a little over the shoulder shot with the interviewee. And then a camera that focuses on the guest, the interviewee. And if these are all being fed to a single mixer, great, then you're going to get the whole thing. But if each camera is recording separately, that makes it much easier to edit down. And you want to be very careful about this sort of thing. For instance, let me just go back to my original slide there. There have been cases where there have been problems with things in studios. For instance, years ago, I don't know how many of you are familiar with mad cow disease. It was primarily in England, or the UK, and there was a lot of worry about would it come over to the United States. And Oprah Winfrey did one of her shows, and she decided to take on the topic, and that's fine. And she brought in, a neurologist. Basically, what this disease did, there was a mad cow disease. if you ate flesh from a cow that had this disease, you could get something called, I can't remember the exact, I think it was Jacob Creutzfeldt disease, and it was a neurological disease, very debilitating. And so obviously it was a very scary time. So anyway, Oprah Winfrey brought in a neurologist, somebody who was an animal health specialist, several other experts, and also brought in a representative from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. And this is the trade association for the cattle industry in the United States. Anyway, there was a lot of discussion about how awful disease it was and how it was transmitted and so forth and so on. Oprah said she swore she would never eat another hamburger again. And then the representative from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association said, yes, this is a horrible disease. We're not denying that, but please understand that in the United States, cattle are tracked very carefully. You know, if for any given cut of beef, you know, that comes to your plate in a restaurant or in the supermarket, we can tell you where that beef came from. We can tell you what farm it came from. In many cases, he said, we can tell you what cow it came from. And he said that's something they don't have in England. So people should be assured. Now, admittedly, somebody from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association will want to reassure people about beef, but he was telling the truth there. When the show finally aired, strangely, the comments from the NCBA representative were missing. That, you know, to reassure people about that. And actually, the NCBA, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, sued Oprah Winfrey. Basically, and there, because in Texas there's a law that says you cannot libel food sources, and they considered it being libel since talking about the fact that they had cut out their assurances that the food supply was safe. In fact, actually, during the trial, Oprah needed to move to Texas to participate in the trial, and as a result, met Dr. Phil, and Dr. Phil became another celebrity out there. So you want to be very careful about this. To give you another example, Merck, a New Jersey pharmaceutical company, had a drug out, and it was a pain relief drug. And it was essentially for arthritis. One of the problems with many of the drugs for arthritis is they can cause ulcers, and they want to avoid that. So, but the drug they had come up with was very easy on the stomach, and I can't actually remember the name of it at the moment. But the point was that it was very well tested. You know, FDA, it met all FDA standards. It was launched. People took it, including the wife of the CEO. And what many companies do, pharmaceutical companies do, even after a drug is on the market, they continue to test it to extend the claims and so forth. And they discovered something unusual. When anyone who was taking the drug at the top dose for more than 18 months, they looked at all the data and they saw an increase in mortality. Now, some people are going to die. They can die from many will die from unrelated causes. You know, they get hit by a bus, or maybe they have an unrelated disease like cancer. So you expect a certain amount of mortality. Unfortunately, they saw such a jump in mortality, they got very concerned. Now, Merck, I think, in this case, their next step was actually, I thought, quite ethical. They actually just did a recall. Now, some people apparently said, well, that's only happens at the higher dose beyond 18 months. We'll just tell people don't take it at the highest dose beyond 18 months. But Merck actually decided to recall the drug, which created a huge problem for them because they started getting sued. very quickly. Anyone who died, I mean, I think there was one case of one gentleman who was in his 90s and he had a whole bunch of other health issues, and he had taken the drug. I think that's what it's called, Vioxx. I forgot. It's called Vioxx. He took Vioxx for, I think, a week at the maximum dosage, and that clearly this gentleman's death had nothing to do with the drug. He was already in bad health. So anyway, this story, which I've just described, is a somewhat complex one. They don't actually know that anyone died from the drug. They just looked at the statistics. Chances are somebody did, but they couldn't prove that any one individual had died. And they had to have Ray Gilmartin, who was their CEO, actually do interviews. And they said, okay, Ray, you can do a live interview, great. You can maybe do a live to tape, but do not do any interview where it's recorded and then played back later and it can be edited, because the story I just told you is a little bit complex. Now, they taught him how to explain it more succinctly than I just have. They worked with him, and if you are going to do media interviews on any significant basis, you probably want to get trained. There are certain things you want to learn to not do in an interview. But they told him, don't do taped interviews, because, and it's not that there's anything nefarious on the part of news media. It's just they're always trying to cut things down to shorter sound bites. So. Some things, by the way, that you should be very careful of if you do a media interview, and you'll never know when it happens. Out in Iowa, I wasn't planning to do a media interview, and all of a sudden, I'm doing a radio interview about the activities that I was involved in out there. So, something to think about. Things, for instance, you would never answer a question yes or no, because that could be edited with any other question, so you don't want to be misrepresented. You should never, for instance, repeat the question that somebody asks you. No, don't repeat the question. Just answer it in full declarative sentences, so they cannot be misunderstood what you mean. Because if it's going to be edited, and most interviews that aren't live are edited, you want to make sure that your words cannot be intentionally or unintentionally misinterpreted. So, and also, how to look into the camera, how to address it. There's a lot of stagecraft. How do you stand, posture, things like that. I actually was working with one head of PR who actually we did some interview training, and he actually got worse, which I thought was a very strange thing. Most people will get better. And it's about public speaking, having confidence, and that sort of thing. If you ever think you might do media interviews, maybe you ought to take a public speaking course. That might help you. Another tool in the public relations toolbox is press conferences. This is where you invite the press to come, and you're going to make a statement. Obviously, you must talk about something significant, otherwise the press won't come. You also need to take questions. There needs to be a Q&A period after your statement. One company made the mistake. I forget, I don't remember what the issue was. I don't even remember the company, but I remember what had happened. This CEO, they had set up a podium in front of the headquarters. He came out, made his statement, and then said, "Thank you very much," and then walked back into the building, not taking any questions. Which actually irritated the members of the press, because they didn't want to be simply an arm of their public relations department, just playing this guy's statement on the air. So what did they show? At least from the TV stations, they showed a picture of the CEO walking away back into the building. Now you might say that's vindictive, but that's life. That's reality. If these news reporters did not, and the news stations did not want to seem like they were just going to regurgitate what the company said. They might have included cuts from the statement, but they were really looking to do Q&A. So this goes back to press relations. You have to treat the press with respect. Otherwise they might not treat you with respect. You can also have press events and tours. For instance, if you have a new factory or something, give them a tour. For a school that I used to teach at, we had actually moved our campus 11 miles to a new, beautiful facility. It was clean. It was all fresh. Nothing had wear and tear on it yet. It was all nice and shiny, and the college made sure that people came in, and they gave them tours. Every member of the press they can get a hold of, and that was a really good thing to do. If you have a new factory, if you have something new, give them a press tour. Advertorials. Advertorials are they're kind of an ad that's made to look like an editorial. And we want to make it seem, this is for high engagement discussions. It's not an ad saying, showing off your shiny new product. It is usually dealing with some issue. I've worked on a few advertorials. I did one for a product where they had some new information they wanted to share with their customers and the influencers. Another one actually I worked on was for Blue Cross Blue Shield, which most people don't realize technically is a not-for-profit organization. At least it was when I worked for them. But they were having a disagreement with various hospitals on how to deal with certain charges, and the advertorials that I helped put together, they essentially talked about why what their position was fair, and they were trying to affect various influencers, leaders in the medical community. And we did a lot of ads that were in like the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Newark Star Ledger, as well as a number of other New Jersey papers. And the idea is that it was a discussion and about the issue, and it wasn't presented as an ad. Actually, the Newark Star Ledger actually required that we put the word advertisement at the top because they didn't want to think that this was their editorial content. So, but this is for, again, more of a high engagement discussion that you want to influence some public or another. In this case, it was the medical administrators of hospitals to affect them, their decisions. Newsletters are great. This is something you send out. It's actually a unique position. You're both the media and the content. And a lot of companies and organizations will send out newsletters. My general rule for newsletters, and what I guide my clients to do, is you need to give your newsletter audience news, something that they can use, something that is not simply promotion. I have actually a printer who I've done business with. They send me a newsletter every so often, and it's really just advertisement for their services. It doesn't tell me anything else, anything about industry trends or anything else. It just says, oh, we've got a new press, and we have this new capability and that new capability. And that would be fine, but that's all it is. I find newsletters, if they have useful information, interesting content, they will be kept, they will be shared. This is what you want out of a newsletter. Websites, of course, are very important, especially in the 21st century. Anytime I hear about something, I go to their website, and about a company or some organization. I want to see what's there. And actually, many of the things we've listed here can go on the website. Press releases, media, media interview files. Maybe there's a video of a press conference. You could do a virtual tour of that. Actually, during the pandemic, there are a lot of organizations, particularly colleges, doing virtual tours of their campus. And if it's an avatar, and certainly your newsletter can be on your website. So there are lots of things you can put on your website, and usually there's a separate department to manage the website, because in a large company there are competing interests. Everyone wants their product or their project to be highlighted on the website. So there's that. And in some cases, you might actually do corporate ads. This is not necessarily product advertising, although it might be somewhat related to products. Some great examples of these would be some that were done by General Electric a while back. General Electric is a venerable company. It was started by Thomas Edison. You may be familiar with many of its products, obviously light bulbs, but also appliances, jet engines. They're into power generation of various sorts, wind and solar, and what else? They were actually in the media business. They owned NBC Universal for a while. They're a whole bunch of locomotives, things like that. Anyway, I remember they did one called a campaign called Eco-Imagination, and that they were trying to be environmentally responsible, and they would highlight some of their products, but more an approach that they would take on. They're being environmentally friendly. They were trying to boost their image that way. Another one, and I don't know what to call it. It was trying to position. Well, as I said, General Electric was started by Thomas Edison. Early 20th century. It's seen as a 20th century company. It's not even on the Dow anymore, unfortunately. The Dow index of stocks. They did, and thought of as a 20th century company, not so much as a 21st century company. And they tried to improve their image, talking about the software that they were developing and how they were using software with all their products. Things like locomotives. Locomotives are very much an 18th century product, even though we've updated them. So they tried to talk about how that, and they had as the center of their campaign a young man who had just been hired by General Electric, and people said, "Oh, you're going to be working on their railroads, or you're going to be building this." And when the father, offers some tools, says, "No, I'm going to be using computers because I'm going to write software," and the father disapproves. And it's kind of sort of a fun approach to it. But the idea was, don't forget that General Electric is a modern company in that it deals with software and all these things. And often with these corporate ads, you are dealing with issues of image and trying to deal with that. Okay, so these are various tools, and obviously in different situations you would use these tools differently. For press releases, there are all sorts of topics. Obviously, if you launch a product, you can talk about that. I said press releases are probably the most important tool you have. It is also one that is relatively inexpensive to do. You just need somebody to write it, and then send it out to the various editors and producers in the news media. So product launches obviously are very important, and you'll want to write all about the product. This one might seem a little odd in terms of marketing. When you hire somebody new, somebody prominent, for an important position perhaps, or there are promotions. Now, these are not going to be big news, but I know many trade organizations have trade journals that will actually have some regular feature about people on the move. I remember seeing a few of these. And that's just to show that a company is moving. It's vibrant. If it's hiring more people, if it's promoting people, that means it's a dynamic company. It's succeeding. and that's probably maybe not the most important topic, but it is something you can always try to come up with various topics. Obviously, if you have a new facility or a new location, you want to let people know that and why it's so wonderful that you have this new location. What is it? What's it for? Is it indicative of success? What is that? Maybe you want to be closer to a certain community. You will build rationales for this sort of thing. Obviously, you're putting a positive spin on it. If you are in some sort of technical field, maybe it's a scientific discovery or a technical advance, um, that could be a topic. Actually, I'm going to give you access to some sample press releases on Canvas. And one actually has to do with a scientific discovery, it has to do with in the agricultural community. There was this product called Ivomec. It was very helpful in eliminating something called mange mites. And actually, around the year, well, at the beginning of this century, some farmers just said, well, we don't need it anymore. We don't need this product more because it doesn't exist. The product problem no longer exists. Mange mites are a thing of the past. Well, turns out they were still around, and that was what the scientific discovery was, and they wanted to update people on the actual facts of that, which of course, coincidentally, meant that the product was still needed. So that's why they were so interested in getting that information out. Maybe your organization has received a special award, or maybe a member of your organization has received a special award. You probably want to put out a press release on this. Maybe some special company or organizational initiative that you've decided to do. Maybe it's like the College Gives Back Day that I mentioned earlier. That would be a special initiative that you would want to promote. Actually, one example, I used to be I became the president of back in around 2002, the president of a professional organization. And around that time, there were a lot of business scandals. I'm not sure how many of you would be familiar with the Enron scandal. Enron was an energy company that had done a number of very unethical and, in many cases, illegal activities. In fact, a number of people went to jail, including somebody who I had gone to high school with. But there were a number of companies that had these scandals, and it was that was kind of the news of the year. Which corporation is doing what illegal activity this year? It was not a good time for corporate America. Anyway, I was part of a professional organization. We were all independent consultants, and to become a member of this organization, you had to sign a code of ethics. And one of the first acts, actually the day I became the president, I said, okay, here's what I want to do. I want every member to re-sign, to reaffirm the code of ethics. And I got some pushback on that. I said, why? Why want to write a press release about it? And some people said, well, okay, fine, okay. And I got everyone to, we took a picture of everyone re-signing. And I received a lot of, as I said, not simply pushback, but, why this is not news. Why would anyone even do anything? But I sent out press releases with photographs, and 3 newspapers in the area published the press release, and 2 of them published the photograph. And all of a sudden, the naysayers were saying, "Oh, okay, that was a great idea," because it gave us a little bit more publicity. So anything like that. Obviously, if you have a charitable event, generally people respond positive to charity, or at least hearing about it. And so that's another great topic. Now, in a specific situation, you will come up with many more other ideas for putting out press releases. You're having an event, somebody has an anniversary, there's some special thing going on. In fact, in many cases, you will generate events just so you can write a press release about it. I think I may have mentioned I'm an author, and I will go to events knowing I will probably not sell any books, but the fact that I'm going to a certain event allows me to put a press release out. And that's kind of helpful to promote my books or to promote my company. Press release requirements. Okay. Essentially, what you're trying to do is you're trying to write a story and get the newspaper, magazine, website, or whatever organization to, um, publish it. Now, they are under these media organizations are under no obligation to publish your story. They're under no obligation to use it in whole if they decide to use it. They could just use parts of it, quotes, take pieces. They might use it as um, a source in a larger story. That's their right, freedom of the press and all that. If you want your press release to be picked up, to be used, and I will say this, that most smaller newspapers or publications will use these, or maybe websites devoted to local news will use them usually unedited. Um, the New York Times, on the other hand, will never publish your press release. They might use your press release might trigger a story, but they'll never just reprint it's a matter of prestige and pride and things like that. Anyway, let's talk about some of the requirements. Obviously, you need a release date. What date is this press release for? In many press releases, they will, you'll also say for immediate release. That means you can publish this right now or use it right now. In some cases, it will be embargoed, and you'll say, okay, you can't publish it today. You can publish it maybe in 2 days. And you might want to do that if you want to give their reporters time to do some research or that sort of thing. And also if you're giving them an exclusive. So, but you want to have a release date, so you know what point in time this occurs. You need to provide contact information. I had a student not long ago say, well, can't you just send one in anonymously? Yeah, you can send one in anonymously, but it will never be published. It has to do with credibility. They want to know who it's coming from. Contact information includes both an email and a telephone number, preferably a cell phone number, because they might want to call you and interview you. And I've had this many times where I've sent out a press release and that has triggered a call where somebody is going to speak to me. Then you have to put a headline. Now, this is a headline you are suggesting that be used for the article when it's published. However, this is often changed mainly for the purposes of space. Maybe your headline is too long, or they just decide they want to do a different headline. This will be followed by, beginning the body will start with the date line, and this may have the date, but it will also have the location. If it might be Paris, or it might be Paris, Texas. You have to distinguish those. And this is very helpful. Actually, I remember one instance where I picked up my local paper and there was a headline describing a scandal with the mayor's wife. And I was shocked because I knew the mayor's wife and she was a very nice person. And she actually was an aide in the school where my children went to school. And then I looked at the date line with the location and realized it was not the mayor of my town. It was the mayor of the wife of a mayor of another town. So it's just for grounding things in locations. Then there's going to be the body, and this is your story that you've written. It needs to be written in a news style. I cannot stress this enough. Now, what's a news style? It is written objectively. It is not an editorial. It is not, for instance, you would never say, hey, this is a really good product coming onto the market and you should get it. That sounds like an ad. However, you could say the XYZ company is launching its new product and then explain what the claims are about the product. If you want to have some energy in it, you can use some quotes. The director of marketing said, "We're really excited about this product, and it's going to be a blockbuster." Um, again, it should be written, so you're reporting on somebody else's quote, what they've said, as opposed to saying it yourself. You have to put yourself in the mind of the reporter and how they would report this. The editor, how would the editor want to edit it? Most news organizations do not want to be seen as advocates, but they want to be seen as objective, presenters of fact. This is why actually many of the people who work in public relations come from a journalism background. They're not writing ad copy; they're writing a story, and occasionally there is some tension between some marketing people and some PR people over this. But in this case, I say the PR people are correct in that it does need to be written objectively, especially if you want it published as is, there's no guarantee of that. Okay, yeah, I mean, you want to also avoid overuse of adjectives and adverbs. You present things very matter-of-factly, but in an interesting way. At the bottom of the body is going to be the boilerplate. Boilerplate is a statement about the organization. Let's say it's a corporation. You will mention the field, the industry that the company is in, maybe what its sales were the previous year or that year. You will certainly include the website. If it's a publicly traded company, and that perhaps might be relevant, you might want to include the ticker symbol and what exchange the stock is traded on. If it's about an individual, you might want to give a background on that individual. When I have done press releases for corporations, I receive the boilerplate. I don't write it myself. I will write the rest of the press release, but the boilerplate is a standard, and that's why it's called a boilerplate. It's literally the plate from a boiler, or that's what it's meant to suggest. It tells you who it's from, and on every press release in a given period, they'll have the same boilerplate. Okay. And then finally, you end it with these three symbols. They are technically called octothorpes. Some people will call them the pound signs. Many of you would call it the hashtag symbol. Whatever, it doesn't really matter. And this just says it's the end. There's no more after this. However, and this is actually a legacy thing. This comes from the wire services. There are obviously various television organizations and newspapers and so forth. For instance, let's take the Newark Star Ledger. The Newark Star Ledger is a regional newspaper, but on in many of its pages, often the front page, you'll see national or even international stories. Does this paper have, reporters in London and Paris and Tokyo and Moscow and so forth? No, they don't. Absolutely not. It's not worth it. So what they do is they subscribe to what are called wire services, such as United Press International or Associated Press. And these are organizations that have reporters all over the world. And those reporters will write stories and submit them to their wire services. And the wire services are syndicated. So many news stories which appear in local newspapers are from these wire services. So that allows a small paper, a regional newspaper, to carry international news or national news. And so they subscribe to these. And so the way they would receive it, years ago, they receive it over a telex machine. The story from, let's say, UPI or Associated Press. And these were machines with long rolls of paper. And you can imagine an editorial assistant or a newsboy or whatever you want to call them would see it coming off the wire, as they called it. And when they see the 3 pound signs, they knew they could rip off the page and bring it to the editor, because now it was over. And that was sort of a technical thing to let you know it was the end of the story. It's less needed now, but people still use it. It's kind of like a little a signal. It says, hey, we know the traditions of journalism, the traditions of public relations, press relations. So we're going to use that's fine too. Uh, One other time it might be technically useful is if you're sending a fax. And I know once I receive that, I've received the last page of the fax. Similar concept. Um, so, and it kind of sends that signal. Uh, we also have what are called video press releases for press, like for television. Um, so, for instance, if you are trying to show the manufacturing of your product, you want them to talk about your product, you might have a cameraman record elements, video pictures of the processing of your product to show it. For instance, I know Johnson & Johnson did a video press release many years ago when they had the Tylenol scandal, where essentially people were accused, somebody had opened up a bottle of Tylenol and taken a pill that had cyanide either in it or on it. I may have referred this to back when I was talking about packaging. And so, and it was actually a similar thing with somebody said they found a hypodermic needle in a can of Pepsi, and Pepsi did the same thing. They videotaped, they showed how quickly the tops are put on, and so there's no way anyone could have stuck a hypodermic needle in the can inside their processing plant. So both Johnson & Johnson and Pepsi did very similar video press releases. Another one, and actually this is an example of proactive. Merck actually produced a product called ivermectin, which generally didn't have much of a market in the human market, except in Africa where people couldn't afford it. So they actually donated. And so what they would do is once a year, the CEO of Merck, along with Jimmy Carter from the Carter Center, this is years ago when Mr. Carter could travel more easily. He's very elderly now, but they would go to Africa and they would actually personally hand out these what were called Mectizan tablets. And if you take one, it's to prevent a disease called river blindness, which was a horrible disease. So they would provide in their video news release pictures of river blindness, which is kind of a creepy thing. It actually, worms get in the eye and cause the blindness. And so you see sort of a white eyeball instead of a regular eyeball. And also they showed, the CEO and Jimmy Carter giving out these Mectizan tablets. Now, obviously they didn't give out all of them. It was just for the photo op. And so you'll often see video press releases sent out. There is a script, just like there's in the press release, but they also have what are a lot of what's called B-roll footage, which would enable a news station to put together their own story. They will never, accept an entire story produced for them, but they'll accept the script and they'll accept the B-roll footage, and then they'll put together. They won't follow the script exactly, but they will. It certainly will help them, and certainly helps get the story. And certainly Merck wanted to get the story of the Mectizan donation into the media. So later, when they had their Vioxx problem, the drug that I talked about previously, they were able to, people were, and actually this is where the quote came from, it's a shame such a bad thing happened to such a good company. I actually heard a financial analyst say that. I was at a meeting, and Merck, I used to work for them, but after that I actually became a consultant for them. And that's when I heard this. It was at a financial analyst meeting. So, proactive press relations, proactive public relations can pay off quite well. So I think I already talked about Priskit, so I'm going to skip that. So, all right, if you have any questions, certainly feel free to email me. I am going to load onto Canvas some sample press releases. I would strongly suggest that you learn how to write a press release. It is a good skill to have, in your back pocket. even though you may not be working in press relations or public relations. You might find yourself in a situation where you don't have an agency at hand, or there's nobody who knows how to do it. And if you know how to do it, now obviously this means you have to develop your writing skills, which is never a bad skill to develop. So, okay, again, if any questions, please send an email. And this particular lecture does not go along with any particular chapter. While the textbook does touch on public relations, I decided to give you more than what the chapter offered. So I look forward to any questions or any discussions, and take care. Bye-bye.